has opened an entirely new way to look at the situation we are currently facing in Israel and for Jews around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Ambassador Michael Oren.
Thank you, Tada. Larry, thank you, Sonny, for building that beautiful amphitheater. I've been there many, many times. It's really extraordinary, so really thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Sherman. Thank you, Laura Cohen from JNF. Thank you, Larry Hochberg is here. Larry, where are you? Here we are. Larry, how do we know this man? Larry does extraordinary work in an organization called ELNET, which ELNET is European APAC. And he's doing God's work there. It's not easy dealing with the Europeans, and you do wonderful work. You all right? I'm right. I'm not fundraising for you, but ELNET is right on, spot on. And Rabbi Wolpe, I don't know if Rabbi Wolpe's still here, but during his sermon, I had a wow moment. And I don't get many wow moments in my life at this point. The wow moment, he talked about this imaginary conversation that he had with his great-great-grandmother. And I have the exact same conversation. Who has that? My grandmother, all my grandparents were born in the old country. My grandmother was born in a tiny Lithuanian village called Anishkaya. It is called Anisht. And when I was the deputy for diplomacy, I made a state visit to Lithuania. And I'm sitting there with the foreign minister of Lithuania. I said, by the way, my grandmother was from this village. She said, oh, I'm going to take you. So the next day, I get into this car, and we drive 70 kilometers outside of Vilnius, and we drive to Anisht. Now, no Jew in this village survived. One day, right shortly after the Nazi invasion, the entire village was taken out and shot in the woods by not a single survivor. Of course, my grandmother had moved before this, but she told me stories, and they stuck with me, of being in the basement of their home while the Cossacks attacked their neighborhood. And that she remembered profoundly the sounds of the hoofs of the Cossacks pounding on the door of this basement as they ran over. And so I had this fantasy when I visited this village, and I saw the houses. It's still called the Jewish Street, and they had basements. And I asked to go down one of these basements, and in the dark, I had the conversation that Rabbi Wolpe had. The same conversation. I said, "Hold on! I know you can hear the Cossacks' hooks over your head, but someday, not so far in the distant future, 50 years from now, there's going to be a Jewish state. And that Jewish state's going to have an army. And your great-grandchildren are going to speak Hebrew. And they will be free people in our land, so hold on." And my grandmother cannot believe what I'm saying to myself. But I said, but we're going to have some problems with these people called the Palestinians. We're going to have a lot of supporters in the world. There's going to be protests against us, and they're going to condemn us for all different crimes in the world. And my grandmother says, "What are you, nuts? Who cares about that? You're going to have a sovereign Jewish state where people speak Hebrew and can study Judaism openly? What an unspeakable, unspeakable privilege." And that conversation, that imaginary conversation, has always stuck with me. Hearing the Cossacks' hoofs and hearing my grandmother assure me that of all the difficulties we face, that we are living in an age of unspeakable privilege, zchut, kavod, to live in a day when we are free Jews in our country, and every single Jew in the world is free. I had to remember that conversation on October 7th. October 7th, 1,200 of our citizens massacred, slaughtered, beheaded, burnt, raped, dismembered. Over 240 of our citizens dragged into satanic captivity in Gaza. But that wasn't the worst of it. It wasn't the worst of it. Countries in the world, like this country, are founded on a social contract. You have a social contract in this country. It's called the Declaration of Independence. It's called the Constitution. The founding mothers and fathers of this country had all read their Rousseau and Locke and Hobbes, and they had a social contract. Israel has a social contract. We have a Declaration of Independence. But we have something far deeper than that. We have a covenant, a brit. Israel was founded in May 1948. May 14th, 1948, it's almost 3 years to the date after the end of the Holocaust, May 8th, 1948. Now, I'm a historian. I've studied Ben Gurion a lot. Ben Gurion was an avid diarist. He would record details. He used to drive people crazy. They was having a conversation with Ben Gurion. He'd be writing about it in his diary. No kidding. May 8th, 1948, the entry, May 8th, 1945, the entry says, World War II ended today. And then he has 3 words in Hebrew. Atzuv, atzuv mod. Sad, very sad. That's all he has to say. But 3 years to the date after that, May 14, 1948, after 1 out of every 3 Jews is killed in the world, Israel comes into being. Into being. There's nothing like it in history, but it comes into being with a promise, with a covenant, with the Brit. What's the Brit say? That Holocaust is not going to happen again. That is what this state is about. We are going to defend the land. We're going to defend the people of Israel. It's not going to happen again. October 7th. It happened again. A breakdown of the covenant. Hamas hit us between the eyes. Not these eyes, but the pronoun I. We all know that Israel has a dual identity, right? It's a democratic and Jewish state. We know how difficult it is to reconcile those two halves. Remember the year before the October 7th, how difficult we had reconciling. But Israel also has another dual identity. It's a dual defense identity. A dual defense, we died. Hello? Yes? Go. A dual defense identity that says, yes, the Brit, we're going to live up to the covenant and defend the land and the people of Israel, but should any of your citizens send their children or their fathers or their brothers and sisters out to defend the country and chas v'chalila they fall prisoner, then the state will do everything in its power to redeem them. That's why in 1976 we sent commandos out to Entebbe to rescue hostages. We'll do everything to rescue hostages. But how then can you rescue hostages and defend the country and defend the people at the same time? Because the easiest thing that the IDF could have done on October 8th was gone into Gaza and filled up those 450 miles of tunnel with some type of gasoline and then said, who's got a match? It would have been over like that. But we can't do that because of the hostages. So on one hand, we cannot defend the state and the people and redeem the hostages at the same time. So we have to try to do both. And that's what the army has been trying to do since October 8th. Putting pressure on Hamas all the time, attacking. Trying, hopefully, to put Hamas in a corner where they're going to release hostages, and it worked twice. In November, we got 100 hostages back. Perhaps rescuing several, as we did last week. What an amazing operation. And trying to do it again. Pushing basic Hamas into that corner known as Rafah and laying siege to Rafah. Hopefully they'll release some of those hostages. But we don't know. And meanwhile, we pay a just immense, monumental price. Condemned by the world. Condemned now by the leaders of this country. And I'm not saying anything. I'm not a bastard in work. I can say what I want. So completely bipartisan, but the fact that the leaders of this country, the President, the Secretary of State, and others have been accusing Israel of war crimes publicly, saying we're over the top, that we're killing too many Palestinians, it is untrue. Sorry for the fact it's untrue, because statistically, and it's not a statistic we should be proud of, but per capita, the ratio of combatant to civilian deaths in Gaza is 1/4 of what it was when the United States was fighting in Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. 1/4. Kind of a world record. So it's untrue, but it's costing us absolute damage because if we're dragged in kind of a criminal court again, an international court, these comments will be adduced as Exhibit A, B, and C. Actually a strategic danger. Condemned by the world, by the Europeans, by the UN, by whom not have we not been condemned? I'll quote an eminent source. An eminent source is this. My barber, great barber. He says the worst part of this war is not the deaths, and now 232 soldiers in addition to the 1,200 killed on October 7th, and the hostages, many of whom have died, as we know that. He says the worst thing for us is the loneliness. There's a sense of being alone in the world. I know that each and every one of you feel that loneliness. The unpredictable, unimaginable levels of anti-Semitism in this country and elsewhere in the world. You know, I grew up in a tough Sicilian neighborhood. I got the crap beat out of me every day for being Jewish. But I meet many, many Jews, even in my own family, who never encountered anti-Semitism before. Everybody has encountered anti-Semitism. Nobody in the American Jewish community has not felt the anti-Semitism and the feeling of being alone. It is so, so difficult. Trying to explain to an audience why a ceasefire, who would be against a ceasefire? Ceasefire is a wonderful thing. People stop shooting one another. But a ceasefire for Israel means death. It means death. It means Hamas gets away with mass murder. Understand this. It means the almost 200,000 Israelis who have been displaced by this war cannot go back to their homes. You wouldn't send your kids back to their home in Metula, in Kiryat Shmona, with Hezbollah. The distance between me and you, Larry, like literally that. There's Hezbollah right there. All right, the entire northern part of the country is uninhabitable. Nobody will do this. And not only will we not restore our internal security, we'll not be able to restore our regional deterrence. Because every enemy we have in the world, especially the Iranians, will internalize that they can hit us with impunity. And when we try to defend ourselves, the world will slap a ceasefire on us and we won't be able to defend ourselves. We'll be dead. Understand what the stake is. Every single Israeli understands what I'm telling you right now. That this is a war for national survival. You've seen lots of protests for the hostage families, and believe me, we have to be very, very sympathetic. We do disagree, but we have to be very sympathetic. We've seen protests against Bibi, because we're always going to have protests with Bibi, just wait. But what you have not seen, not one time anywhere, is an anti-war protest. Not one. How can that be? After more than 4 months of brutal combat. I spent 35 years in the military. The paratroop was a lone soldier. I've been through several wars. What these young people are going through in Gaza is like nothing I've ever experienced. We're talking about combat 24/7 in the worst possible conditions. They tell me it's absolute hell. And yet none of them are coming out and saying we have to stop. On the contrary, they're coming out and saying don't demobilize us. Don't stop. Whatever you do, if the government tries to do a too long ceasefire, just watch the army come out and oppose it. Watch it. It's extraordinary. What I talked about this morning is the other half of it. And I don't want to repeat myself, those of you who heard my Dvar Torah today about the Parshat Truma, is the outpouring of volunteerism in the state of Israel. We now are witness to something we've never thought of in the world, that we're a state, a society, doesn't wait for the government and the state to give it orders. But on October 8th, unilaterally, simultaneously picks up arms and goes to war. Simultaneously, spontaneously picks up and offers support for the hostage families, for the bereaved families, for the displaced families, for the farmers who can't pick their crops. I don't know anything like it in the history of humankind. I do a lot of research in the history of humankind. Nothing like it. A society which is so, so strong, and not just a society, a people. The Jewish people in a crazy, almost insane way. We have to thank Hamas. Hamas did us a favor. Hamas reminded us of who we are. Hamas reminded us that we are a people, that we're a nation, we're a state. Hamas reminded us that we're a mishpacha. Kol Aravim, Kol Yisrael, Aravim Zed. We're all responsible for one another. And what we're living through is, it just, in that way, a miraculous period. I've been in government and public life for many, many years, and I've learned that the hard way, that every terrible crisis and tragedy is also an opportunity. And this is an opportunity. I'm here ostensibly to talk about this book, 2048. You got it there? There it is. Hold it up. 2048. 2048. Eliovitz represents 2048 here, Eli. Hi. Yes, it's in Arabic and Hebrew. If you want to practice them, they're in there. 80 pages in English. There's a book I've written well before the war, but it talks about what kind of state we want to see on our 100th birthday, 2048. It's a project that grew up out of my time in the Prime Minister's office. And it covers 22 areas of Israel. It's social policy, education policy, foreign policy, Israel diaspora, Israel Jews, Israel Palestinians, everything, defense policy. But the theme that runs through this whole book is that these challenges can seem insurmountable. Addressing the Bedouin issue in the South, addressing the question of Haredi education, It can seem insurmountable. But the key to it all is Zionism. It is Zionism. And Zionism, from my point of view, has one word definition. And that word is responsibility. You know, you can be in this country, you can be Jewish in this country, you can run for office, you can, serve the army, but it's only in Israel. It's only in Israel where we as Jews can accept responsibility for our electricity and our sewers and our defense policy. If we accept that responsibility, and everything that goes wrong in Israel in the past, but everything that went wrong on October 7th was a failure to assume responsibility. And that's what this moment is about. It's about an opportunity to once again assume responsibility. I'm greatly honored to be here under the sponsorship of JNF. I've lived in the Negev for years. I've lived in the North. I've lived all over the place. I've seen JNF in action. There's nothing like it. This is an organization that is not interested in coming to Jerusalem and taking pictures with members of the Knesset. They never did it with me. And I think it's wonderful. They're all about the work. It's rebuilding the South, expanding the North, taking care of displaced people, taking care of soldiers with disabilities, building the daycare centers, the Alexander Mosque High School, which is now being revived, which is amazing to my mind, building a Zionist village in the South where they're going to teach Zionism to people at a time when Zionism, where Meta is what we're trying to discuss and trying to decide whether Zionism is a bad word or not. Isn't that amazing? So I'm deeply honored. JNF is about that responsibility. That's just what it's about. On May 14th, 1948, Ben-Gurion wrote his diary again. You can't believe this. Ben-Gurion was a character. He writes 3 pages. He writes everything he ate for breakfast. He hates the fact that the Haggadah has come to him and said, we only have 1 million bullets, don't declare the state. He writes everything, every conversation he has. And at the end, he writes a tiny little script. He says, oh, by the way, today I declared the state of Israel. He did this because he had work to do. He wasn't going to, wasn't going to take a victory lap. He had to roll up his sleeves. He had to create a country that was going to absorb immigrants from 70 different countries in the world, teach them a language, forge a nation, forge a culture. He had to fight off 6 Arab armies. He had to build an economy. He had to create a democracy, which is today one of the few democracies, few countries in the world that's never known a second of non-democratic governance. The only country on that list has never known a moment of peace. He would build an army that one day would be over twice as big as the British and French armies combined, with 7 of the world's leading universities. I go on with all the factors. My favorite one is Israel has more Nobel Prizes per capita than any countries in the world, and more Nobel Prize winner than it has gold medal winning Olympic athletes. And only a Jewish state would be proud of that. Okay? You guys are like coming home, Mom, I want a gold medal. Yes, and where's your Nobel Prize? Big deal. And I've been living in Israel for a very long time, and the Israel I came to back then was the Wild West. We didn't have relations with India, China, the Soviet bloc countries, the 12 of them. We didn't have relations with Africa. We didn't have relations with South America. We had a nice relationship with the United States, but not a strategic alliance. No peace with Egypt, no peace with Jordan. Certainly not the Abraham Accord countries. The food was terrible. The falafel was bad. And you screwed ahead in my lifetime. By the way, there were 3 million Jews in prison behind the Soviet curtain. Amazing. You screwed ahead in my lifetime. Not that ancient history. Not Haiti. Still. And we have relations with all these countries in the world. We have peace with so many of our neighbors. We have the deepest, most multifaceted alliance with the United States has ever had. Any foreign country, including Great Britain, by the way. And JNF runs culinary tours of Israel, which I think is totally mind-boggling. People come to Israel for the food, which I think is amazing. All of this, yes, really. All of this because we assume responsibility. All of this because we take advantage of an opportunity that's been given to us. This is Truma. This is the Truma moment for each and every one of us. As Ben-Gurion, both in 1945 and 1948, it's time to roll up our sleeves and get to work. Because we're privileged to have that, because we're not in a basement somewhere in Lithuania listening to the Cossacks' hoofs, pounding over our heads. We're here. Every Jew in the world is free. And we have the ability, we have the privilege, and the right to make those donations, to accept our responsibility, and to be a free people in the fullest sense of the word. free and secure in our land and elsewhere. Now,
I'll ask a couple of questions, and then we'll have time for Q&A from the audience, so don't leave yet. You get a chance to interact with Ambassador. So first of all, I read this book twice, once before October 7th, and then again after.
Yeah.
And saw you, of course, just days after Denver at the Jewish National Fund Global Conference, which next year is in Dallas, November 14th to 16th, so make sure you join the Sinai Temple delegation to Dallas. It's an amazing experience. Dr. Wolpe said 4,000 teens in Orlando for BPYO. There are hundreds of students and college students, and you spoke to even our high school students. If you were writing this post-October 7th, is there a chapter that you would add?
Oh, definitely. I wouldn't change a word in it, but I definitely add it. And that would be, it would follow the theme. The theme is the breakdown of responsibility. And to be more specific about the responsibility to uphold sovereignty, the biggest problem we face, whether it's in education or healthcare, or in the Negev where there's basically no law, no effective law in the Negev. Bedouin build illegally 400,000 structures, there's no control over drug trafficking, over gun trafficking, is that we as a Jewish people do not understand sovereignty. For 2,000 years we didn't know what it was to be sovereign, to be independent. And then one day in 1948 we woke up and found ourselves the proud owners of this sovereign nation, and we don't know what it is. So how is it that, for example, ultra-Orthodox children receive less than a second grade education, right? Mathematics, almost no English. So when they get to be 18, it's not that they just don't go into the army, they can't go into the economy. And by 2048, 40% of the elementary school children are going to be Haredi. So how does the country sustain itself in the long run? Economically, it can't. And no one's taking responsibility for this. So this is sovereignty. You cannot have a huge swath of your population getting what is less than a third world education. That's responsibility. And so, yes, what was it? What was October 7th? We didn't take responsibility for the border. We sent all these people to live along the border. We didn't take responsibility for the defense. We didn't take responsibility for the nature of our defensive system, which was highly dependent, overly dependent on technology, dealing with an enemy that is using medieval tactics, tunnels, right? Something from the 13th century. So, we have to, the most crucial challenge for us is to live up to what we say ourselves. We are Zionists. Zionism's responsibility is to be responsible to uphold our sovereignty. That's what I would add.
So you're speaking to a very Zionist crowd here. We love Israel. We do Israel. It's on our mind every single day. When you spoke to the rabbinical students when I was in your presence in Denver, and you were basically on TV every single moment during that time, CNN, Fox, everything, you said something interesting that you said sometimes we have to say things that we might not necessarily believe in order to get to the...
You're not going to make me say this in front of the whole audience.
No, I don't mean that exactly.
That's hard for us.
But how do we interact with people that are not us, that don't understand the word Zionism? It's a bad word. It's not responsibility. It's oppression. And you're in these spaces where you do have that ability to not necessarily be combative, but to be inspiring. What are the keys? It begins with Jewish peoplehood. Okay? If you accept that the Jews are a people, we are a people, we're not, as some other people say, just a religion, and we're not even ethnicity anymore. When I grew up, Jews were ethnicity. We had our own food. Only we ate bagels when I was a kid. They were horrible. They were white and horrible. Nobody ate them. Right? We had our own humor. We had Alan Sherman singing. Right? The only Borscht Belt. We were an ethnicity. And we weren't white. When I used to fill out forms when I was a kid, they asked you, what race you were. We were Jewish. We weren't considered white back then. I played sports in college, and I'm etched into the bathroom wall. I'll never forget, of my gym was, "Are Jews white?" And underneath it, someone had scrawled, "Yes, but." The but has disappeared. There's no more buts. We have a very different identity. So it's saying that Jews are a people. And once you acknowledge that Jews are a people, there is a Jewish people, then Jews are endowed as any other people with the inalienable right of self-determination in our homeland.
And people come at you, well, what about the law of return? You're a Jew living in, Beverly Hills, you can come back to Israel and be a citizen, but if I'm a Palestinian living in Beverly Hills, I can't do that. And I said, well, that's true, but Palestinians are a member of an Arab nation. You have 21 different nations you can go to. We got one. And the law of return is affirmative action for the Jewish people. For using their language, it's affirmative action. It's righting an historic wrong of statelessness, of powerlessness that cost us immensely, without precedent, over history. And if you put it in those terms, you have a beginning, perhaps, of a discussion. Our problem is, and I don't want to take this answer in a different direction, but again, we have to thank Hamas. Forgive me for saying this. Hamas solved two questions that were facing American Jewry. How to define anti-Semitism and what to do about anti-Semitism, what you defined it. Because, I write a lot. I was telling you from a pathological writer. I just write nonstop, like Ben Gurion in that way. Not in a diary, but I also write for a number of publications. One of the problems I love writing for is the forward, because I'm like the resident righty. And I wrote a series of articles in the forward about my family's Thanksgiving meals over the years. You can look them up. And it talks about, in every Thanksgiving meal that I happen to be in the United States, and at my mother's house, we'd have a discussion about anti-Semitism and how this discussion has changed over the years. Because 3 years ago, it was about, anti-Semitism. Anti-Zionism isn't really anti-Semitism. And when you encounter anti-Semitism, it's an opportunity, it's an educational moment. You can sit down and discuss and explain to people about the Holocaust and why anti-Semitism is bad. This last Thanksgiving, our last Thanksgiving with my mom, the conversation completely changed. Everybody now knows that anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism is not a question anymore. Clearly, the people out there calling for river to sea also want to throw Jews into Auschwitz again, right? They say it. And secondly, nobody thinks it's an educational moment anymore. No one thinks you can go out to those protests and say, hey, let me remind you about the Holocaust. Let me remind you about the Inquisition. They're going to listen to you. No. Everyone understands now that we are in a fight. And the good news is, you have the tools to fight. American Jews have just begun to understand the tools at their disposal. You just took down 2 presidents of 2 of America's leading universities. Who would have thought you had that ability 4 months ago? Who would have thought you had the power to, you know how many states are outlawing the sale of Ben & Jerry's right now? Amazing. You have power, and power to do good, to fight anti-Semitism. You do not have to be quiet. And you don't have to be quiet when your own leaders are telling the world that the state of Israel is a war criminal state. Do not let them get away with that, really.
So if you were ambassador today, what would you be focusing on right now?
Valium. Washington today is much more difficult than I was. I was during the Obama period, which was difficult. It was the most difficult period in the history of U.S.-Israel relations, but this is difficult for a different reason because of the polarization in Israel. You can't really, everything is a zero-sum game. So if I say to American Jews, for example, you should criticize President Biden and Secretary of State Blinken for coming out and saying that we are dehumanizing and killing too many Palestinians, because it's untrue, that immediately gets interpreted as something pro-Republican. And by the way, I worked many, many years with Joe Biden and with Tony Blinken. I like them, I respect them, I know they care about Israel, but it doesn't mean they're above criticism. And that's difficult. That is a very difficult environment for an ambassador to be in, especially an ambassador who's about unification, about bringing people together. I used to think of myself as having, one foot and 2 chariots going in opposite directions, right? Now the chariots are opposite of the halls. I mean, really. I mean, how can you do that? It'd be very, very difficult. But I think that there are different ambassadors with different ideas. And what I view myself as the ambassador of the people of Israel, the state of Israel, the people of the United States, whenever I could. I could get out of Washington. I visited communities and places you wouldn't believe. My father had been a career soldier, and so I had a close connection with the U.S. military. I visited military bases everywhere, real America, in Kansas, Oklahoma. Went to a church almost every Sunday, African churches, all different churches, Presbyterians. What was the big church on Mulholland Drive? The big. Yeah, Presbyterians. I gave a speech, their great speech, I'll never forget that. So that was my job. And to try to keep the channels open, even though they were most difficult times. And that Here the very specific message is the Biden administration has adopted two policies which are essential to our security, if not our survival. It's ammo and veto. We run low on ammo. We're running low on ammo now. Certainly is a very critical shortage. The Biden administration has kept up the flow of ammo. I hope they're not going to start squeezing us now. And they're casting vetoes in the Security Council that would impose the ceasefire. The ceasefire is death. How long this is going to maintain, I don't know. But the position of the American Jewish community should be, those who care about Israel, ammo, veto. Okay? If you are pro-Israel, you do those two things. And that's the most crucial service you can do for the state of Israel.
So when I heard you speak for the first time as a young rabbinical student, I was at APAC, and you were the first person that introduced me to the letters BDNS. And, it was prophetic at that moment, understanding.
I came back to Israel in 2014, I talked about BDS, and everyone laughed at me.
You actually
no one ever heard of it.
What? Go ahead, please.
Boycott, divestment, and sanctions. It's a movement to take down the state of Israel. It's not a two-state movement. It's designed to kill us. And I brought it to the heads of Israel security, and they laughed at me. Those of you who know Hebrew, he says, "Maze, BDS, B'davar Sodi." Right? And no, now they take it seriously.
So one last question before we open it up. You conclude your books or manifesto or journal speaking about the peace and prosperity plan, and you speak about not changing the status quo, but using the status quo to actually create something. Now that the United States is saying, out of this war, we're talking about a two-state solution. We're just on the verge of Saudi Arabia on October 6th. We're not talking about 2048, we're talking about Yom Ha'atzmaut.
The longest chapter in this book is about the peace process. Now, I talk about I was an advisor to Yitzhak Rabin during the outset of the Oslo process. I participated in the last round of negotiations with Palestinians. I was advisor to the Trump peace plan. I've gone the whole route. So I'm putting 30 some odd years of experience into this chapter. And I could spend literally an hour just talking about this. The bottom line is that the two-state solution is the greatest tragedy for the Palestinian people. Because it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, A, because the Palestinians don't want it, and they've told us again and again and again they don't want it. Right now, 85% of the Palestinians in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, want Hamas. Hamas is not in favor of a two-day solution, guys. None. Two, you cannot adduce a single shred of evidence over the last 100, 120 years that the Palestinians are capable of sustaining a nation state. I can adduce a mountain of evidence to show that they're not capable of sustaining a nation state. If you create that nation state, it's going to fall apart in a matter of days. Who's going to run this state? The United States is thinking about bringing along Salam Fayyad. Now, I know Salam Fayyad well, and he was for those who don't remember his name, he was the prime minister briefly of the Palestinian Authority for about 1.5 years, over a decade ago. He's a wonderful guy, American, educated, Texas educated. And he was incorruptible, so they threw him out. They threw him out, literally. And I used to get him annoyed. I said, Fayyad, you're a Palestinian Zionist. Because he understood you build a state from the bottom up with transparent, stable institutions. Brazilian guys have no idea how to build an institution. They do collect taxes, but at gunpoint. And the United States wants to bring him back. Okay, put him as the head of the Palestinian state. Who's going to keep him there? Who's going to keep him alive for 48 hours? You're going to bring in 10,000 American soldiers to keep him alive? How are you going to assure Israel that it's not going to be terrorist? Very nice thing that the administration says, well, we're going to create a Palestinian state together with Saudi Arabia, get this, without consulting us, and it will not threaten Israel. Well, who's going to determine what a threat is? I live in Jaffa. Okay, if you look out my rear mirror, you look out one way, you look at the sea, the other way you look out the Hebron Hills. They create a Palestinian state there. It falls apart. We're not going to be in rocket range. We're going to be in rifle range. Rifle range. So it's a tragedy for the Palestinian people that after 32 years of failure since Oslo, right, they keep on harping on this one solution which has zero chance of success. But there are many other ways you can go. You can talk about federal solutions. You can talk about cantonment solutions. You can talk about extended autonomy solutions. There's so many ways that you can be creative. And by the way, I know senior Democrats agree with what I'm saying, but they can't do it publicly because of political, internal, domestic constraints. They know it. And it's sad. It's very sad. And so, you'll read the conclusions. There's more details in this book. I talk about it. This is some of the more distressing news I've seen. And what it seems to be almost like a plan to make us look really bad, isolate us even further, because we're going to have to, reject it. Now, here's the big question. I'm going to say this for the first time publicly. What they're doing, by negotiating with Arabs, Palestinians, for the creation of a Palestinian state without really consulting us is unconscionable. But should we be rejecting it the way we're rejecting it? And I understand that our Prime Minister has internal considerations as well. Okay? Everyone's got their domestic politics. But should we say the following? Listen, we're not going to agree to the creation of a Palestinian state. That's going to jeopardize our existence. But, hey, we're open to discussions. You guys want a path to a Palestinian state? Okay, a path is a thing with gravel and shrubbery. We're happy to discuss a path. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't cost us anything. But it makes us seem less objective to everything. Everything. Be a little bit flexible. It don't cost. The Palestinians are going to reject it anyway. So this is, it's one thing to be right, but it ought to be, have to be right and smart. And in this world, we have to be right and smart. I don't have to tell you this. We have the only holy book in the world of the people. That's not about heroism, and not about Ulysses, and not about Gilgamesh. Our story, our national story, is a story of failure. Right? And how do we fail? We fail by failing to navigate smartly between empires. That's how we fail. We fail again and again. And it's teaching us something, the Tanakh, saying, be smart. Navigate intelligently. Okay? Don't just be right. Be intelligent. That's the message of the Tanakh.
And who's supposed to read this book in Arabic?
Yeah.
Really?
It's very important that I put it in Arabic. Very important. There's 21% of our population is in Arabic. There have been many sections that deal with the status of and future of our Arab citizens. And I'll give you the one-foot version of it. It's called, in English, it's called the New Deal. It doesn't quite translate very well into Hebrew. And the deal is this. It says the following. There are 194 nation states in the world. Most of them are nation states. Most of those nation states have large or significant non-national minorities, and those national minorities are overwhelmingly loyal to those nation states. The best example I give you is Anglo Jewry. Anybody British here? No? Yeah, oh yeah, Ellie. Yeah. Ellie, you ever salute the Union Jack? Never? Come on. It's because you went to a Jewish school in Golders Green or something, right? But Anglo Jewry, 250,000 of them, will salute, serve, and sometimes die to a flag that has not one but 3 crosses on it. They'll sing God Save the King, who's also the head of the Church of England, to whom they pay taxes as the head of the Church of England. Okay? No one says, hey, I'm not going to salute that flag. It's got a cross. Why can't Arabs salute our flag? Why can't they serve our country? And we, in the New Deal, the State of Israel has to do everything it can to fight discrimination, to fight inequality in a Churchillian way, in the classroom, in the media, in the workplace. But the deal is this. In return for that, we get loyalty, but true loyalty. And the signs are propitious. Every year they do a survey. How many Israeli Arabs feel proud to be Israelis? Every year it goes up. Now it's past the 50% mark. We've got to get up to the 80-90% mark. And why? We have made room in our national story for many people, for the Druze and the Caucasians, for the Circassians, for the Ethiopians. We have room in our narrative for Israeli Arabs. And that's one of the great challenges of 2048.
Open up the couple of questions. Christopher, we're going to come around with the mic. We ask, please, that we...
I'm going
to have you since I know these people.
Let
It's
me
going to
get-
be
I wanna
no
get David
narrative,
here.
but question.
Let me get David and Laura right here in the front. I want to just say a word about this wonderful couple. It's David and Laura, and they are one of the champions of lone soldiers in Israel. The Mirages, the appropriately named Mirages, and I've had the great honor of working with them. I was a lone soldier. They had the honor of establishing the Lone Soldier Caucus in the Knesset. And they do some wonderful work. Okay, please, David.
Michael, imagine Israel a year from now with the trauma that it has gone through. Not only we have had the trauma of October 7th and the hostages. But 300,000 reservists were pulled out of the family and their work, and their families and their children went through a great deal of trauma. How does Israel going to deal with this and turn the country around?
How many ways? And I want to add to that trauma. I have 3 assistants. All of whom have been in uniform almost continually since October 7th. They tell me what they experienced in Gaza. It was unspeakable. The cats are booby-trapped. The roosters are booby-trapped. The terrorists are dressed as women. Babies are hooked up with bombs. The ground, the air is toxic. I mean, we're talking about young men, for the most part, coming out and will have experienced something that even I have not experienced in many wars. Nothing. Huge parts of the country that have been under rocket fire, prolonged rocket fire, bereaved families, displaced families, loneliness. And this would seem insurmountable, except for one fact. We've been here before. Can you imagine what Israel was like in May 1948? Where a huge chunk of the country were Holocaust survivors, had experienced the worst horrors that humanity has ever produced. They fought in a war in which 1% of the population was killed. By the way, according to international standards, that's a prohibitive number. It's too high. 1 out of every 100 Israelis were killed in the War of Independence. And they remained under fire after that, with a country that was completely isolated, had no allies in the world. And look what we built. Because, David, we are the Jewish people. And damn, are we strong. We are incredibly strong. And when we come together, as God asks us to do in this parasha, we're literally unbeatable. That's why we're sitting here. I'll just tell you a quick story. I wasn't planning to tell this story. About a year ago, we went for a family trip to Sicily. And the height of the trip, the height of the trip to Sicily was not the height. We went down 30 feet underground in Palermo. Sorry, it was in Syracuse, to see the oldest mikveh bath in Europe. They're still running. Now, Sicily's amazing. It's got Roman ruins and Greek ruins and Ottoman ruins and Norman ruins. It's great. All it's great. If you're an archaeologist, if you're a historian, it's nothing like it. It's heaven. Food's not bad. And you come underground, you come up, and you see all of these ruins. You see yourself, oh God, they're all gone. We're still here. They're all gone. The Romans, the Greeks, the Ottomans, everybody. We're still here. Why are we still here? Because we are the Jewish people. And because when we come together, and the way that Israel has come together right now, we are, this is not to in any way diminish the trauma. And it's huge. And what we're not talking about are the many, many thousands of soldiers who have been wounded and grievously wounded. The great miracle of Israeli medicine is that soldiers who would have died are now alive. But hundreds of blind soldiers now. Hundreds. Yeah. Without limbs. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. We're going to have to deal with this. But we will, because we're still here.
Ambassador, thank you for being here today. Could you please give us your best prediction of what Gaza is going to look like in terms of our involvement with it after the war? Are we going to go back to a police state to constantly have to have presence there again?
So I know you're familiar with my buddy Brett Stevens. He has a journal called Sapir, which you probably read. 2 months ago in Sapir, I had an article called The Day After. I was asked by Brett, okay, what's your vision for the day after? And I think I gave a vision that would have been, I think, acceptable to the vast majority of Israelis. And the vision was, first of all, demilitarization, no more rockets, no more rocket arsenals, de-radicalization, which is the hardest task, a very big task. You have to begin to, kids in Gaza are educated from before they can walk, that the holiest thing they can do is slit a Jew's throat. Right? October 7th was shocking, but it wasn't surprising. Not when you look at Hamas Sesame Street, which is literally teaching kids to stab, all the time stab and kill. That's my favorite Sesame Street has them stabbing the President of the United States, taking over the White House and turning it into a mosque. This is what the kids are taught. Summer camps, nursery schools. You de-radicalize. You have to internationalize the Gaza Strip. It's not just an Israeli problem. It's not just an Israeli-Egyptian problem. It's an international problem. You have to have an international force there with a large inter-Arab component that can supervise security. You have to make a 1 to 2 kilometer demilitarized zone around the border. The Biden administration says, no, 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 we're going to have to say tough. You don't like demilitarized zones? You give up your demilitarized zone between North and South Korea, and we'll give one around Gaza. Let's see if we do that. Okay? No, no one can't near that border again. No one can't near that border. And the hardest task, I say in the article, would be finding an indigenous Palestinian leadership that cares more about their children and the lives of their grandchildren than they do about denying the lives of our children and grandchildren. That's going to be very difficult. And, you know, it is clearly that Israel is going to have to maintain security control for a very long time. A very long time. I'm not going to say how long. No one can say how long. But you want to take some soldiers from Belgium and put them there and say you defend the Jewish state, or even soldiers from Los Angeles that defend the Jewish state. We don't want it. We don't want anyone to die for our security. And I think actually the Americans would defend us, the Belgians wouldn't. And so that's the situation. And it's not going to happen overnight. It's like the same thing with peace, you know, this notion of creating a Palestinian state. I think you mentioned that I was the head of a classified committee in Knesset. We dealt with very, very sensitive issues. And one of the issues we dealt with behind very closed doors was the Palestinian Authority's education system. We talk about what education the Gaza kids get. It made me ill to my stomach, and I've seen tough things in my life. The PA teaches kids where to stick the knife, how to draw the knife across the jugular, in great detail. You want peace? You want to stick a Palestinian state there? No. It'll take 40 years, and it begins by changing that education. You've got to get rid of UNRWA. Have to. UNRWA is about the conflict. It's one of the great perpetuating elements of the conflict. You want peace? Then invest in peace. Be serious about it. This is not about an election in Michigan. Okay? This is about peace in Israel and peace in the Middle East and frankly in the world. And get serious about it and invest in it. It's long term, not short term. Two more questions. How about a woman? Two, three. I'll get try. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Not working. I can hear you, but I don't know if anybody else can.
I said loud.
Into it.
There you go.
My father, Fred Kahan of Shalom, was the executive director of the Jewish National Fund from 1952. He was awarded the highest medal of the state of... You cannot hear me? Okay. My father, Fred Kahan of Shalom, was the executive director of a little emergent group that became the JNF of Los Angeles. He was awarded the highest honor of the state of Israel. Now, all through the years, and he was with the original leaders, there are people in this audience that knew him well from the same community. He said the major problem was the lack of PR. The lack of PR, one of the major problems. Now, for example, we come from a tradition of, in Yiddish-speaking people, mach nicht wissendig, mach nicht kein Gewalt, don't draw any attention to yourself. We also come from a wonderful background of humility. The highest form of philanthropy is anonymity in our culture. But we are so lacking in this. Thank goodness this week I heard that finally at Harvard, they were showing the students actual pictures of October 7th. But we don't do this enough. We don't do this enough. And he's gone 37 years and still Israel is lacking so much.
So this is the most frequently asked question I get, which is why is Israel's PR so bad? Okay? And I've heard this question now for probably about a half a century, and there are many answers to it. Certainly, from Israel's point of view, there's a certain mentality. It goes back to Ben Gurion. It's not important what the Goyim think; it's what the Jews do. In fact, what the Goyim think actually can impact what the Jews can and cannot do. To a young generation of Israelis who say, no matter what we do, they're going to condemn us anyway. So why should we even bother? And I've been, in Israel diplomacy and public diplomacy for a very long time, and I sit on interministerial committees about this, and I'm the bad guy. When they say we have to invest more in campuses, we have to invest more in, this, yes, I'm actually the head of another NGO. I can't list all my NGOs. One's called the Israel Advocacy Group. And this is what we do. We defend Israel and the media worldwide. And, you can see the list of the interviews I've had since October 7th. It'll leave you dizzy. Okay, especially since most of these interviews are done at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning Israel time, which is your prime time. Damn you. And, but I'm also very realistic. And here's the news that I give to the interministerial committees. The same news. I said, guys, I got some really bad information for you. We are the Jewish state. We're not Belgium. We're not Luxembourg. And if you look not so deeply behind most of the headlines, you're going to find classic anti-Semitic tropes. Classic. I'll give you an obvious one. How many times do you read per day of 28,000 Gazans, according to the Gazan Health Ministry, which is Hamas? Hamas is to health what, I don't know, the 60s were to virginity. I mean, really, really. So, probably politically incorrect. I've been on the road for a long time. And of the 28,000, 10,000 are children. Now, you must understand that Gaza, they include the 12,000 terrorists we've killed. They include the 30% of the Palestinians who've been killed by Gaza rockets falling short. So you're down to about 12,000, 13,000 Palestinian casualties. And every Palestinian casualty is a tragedy. Make no mistake about that. But 10,000 children is statistically impossible. Why 10,000 children? It's the massacre of the innocents. From the book of Matthew, 144,000 innocent children murdered by a Jewish king. I can give credit to you guys. You don't have the privilege of having AOC as your congresswoman. But AOC actually came out last Christmas and said Israel's guilty of the massacre of the innocents. She actually said it. She tweeted it. It is the blood libel. And you're hearing the blood libel now from your own administration. It's a blood libel. It's classic. And so we have to internalize that we will always be treated as the Jew. And I was telling Rabbi Sherman and Rabbi Wolpe before that, dealing with this administration, again, I know them very well. These are people who did not shed a single tear for the massacre of 500,000 Syrians. Didn't shed a single tear for abandoning hundreds of thousands of Afghani women. Not a single tear. But 28,000 Palestinians keeps them awake all night. Why? Because the people doing it are Jews. That's the only reason. If no one cared when the Syrians were massacring the Palestinians, nobody cared. Nobody cared. When the Lebanese were massacring Syrians, nobody cared. It's all about the fact that we are the Jewish state. And let's accept it. And we can begin to fight, as we fought, at Harvard and Penn. We can fight. I want to say one last thing about this. I've met many Jewish communities around the United States, and they asked me, what should we do? And I said, basically, American Jews have 3 choices. One of 3 choices. One, you can hide. You take the mezuzahs off your door, close the door, don't go outside. Not much of an option. You can move to Israel. We like that one. But also you can stay and fight, which I think is the preferred option. And now we're learning how you can fight. You can fight. And you have tools at your disposal you never dreamed of. And drawing attention to yourself is a problem. We'll deal with it. But really, it's a remarkable moment. I remain very optimistic. I think. There was another can. Make it 3 last questions, and I'll answer all in one fell swoop. Okay? Whatever. But keep them real short, okay? So we can get everyone in there.
Real short.
Can we move from the micro look of the details, which is of course phenomenal and important, to the macro picture? The macro picture that I see is that the jihadist, extremist Muslims have an intention to control the Western civilization. The Jews are just one station on the road.
Good.
The world
Next.
must hear
I got
this.
it. I got it. This gentleman back there. I'll get them all. The more we wait, the more hands go up.
Ambassador Oren, I wanted to ask a question about reflecting on your position as an ambassador. The regime in Iran, you know, that's the one that's behind so much. Why is it that the Biden administration is not willing to deal with the regime in Iran?
Got it. I got it. Good. Next. Way over there. There's two women over there. We'll stop there.
What keeps me up at night are the Jews who are part of If Not Now and Jewish Voices for Peace. As Jews here who are very pro-Israel and Zionist, how do we, as American Jews, handle our brethren who just are off the rocker?
First and foremost, thank you so much for coming and speaking to us. Now, aid to Israel is more important than any other time. The bill for aid to Israel passed Senate, but it is being held at the House of Representatives, and the Speaker does not even want to put it to vote. What can we do to ensure that bill is put to vote? I have already contacted my congressman, but he's a Democrat, and I think he's powerless if the Speaker of the House does not put the bill to vote. Should we as a community contact the office of the Speaker of the House to ensure that bill is put to vote?
That's an interesting contrast to the previous question about JVP and If Not Now. And the answer, unfortunately, is you really can't do anything. You know, this is not a new phenomenon in Jewish history. You know, during the Amidah, we talk about Tamal Shinim, right? Tikva, Tamal Shinim. We've dealt with members of our community, our people, who have gone against us in the past, throughout history. The wicked sons. And there's not much we can do about it. We can't, maybe we can try to educate them, but there's not much opportunity to do that. And we just have to, you know, deal with it and understand it's not new. And make sure that the other people who are not Jewish understand that these groups do not speak for the Jewish people. That's the best you can do. And by the way, I'm in favor of a very wide tent for Jewish peoplehood. But these people are taking themselves out of Jewish people. And that, we try to bring them back. In the end, you know, when you say, Lo tiyeh tikva l'mal shanim, they will not have any, there won't be any hope for those who betray us. At the end of the day, those who are trying to betray us, what they're basically saying is that we're not those Jews. We're different Jews. We're the good Jews. But in the end, it won't help them. Lo tiyeh tikva. Because the anti-Semites got to come for them too. They don't care whether they support Israel or not. Really. But they're going to try to throw, you know, Israel to those dogs, but the dogs won't be satisfied with that. They'll go for more. On the question of the aid, oh boy, that's a hard one. It's all caught up in the immigration issue. And what, again, here you can unite as a community and say to both parties, enough of this crap. We need this aid. And you can say, you know, use your power. You have it. You have that. Don't let other people do it. And that's the best I can tell you. Will it work? I don't know, because Washington's pretty dysfunctional, unfortunately. All right? And it's a particularly grim period in this way. But that's the best I can tell you. That one. Iran. So I spent the last 17 years dealing with the Iranian issue. And, you know, interacting with the United States, there was a fundamental difference between us and American administrations. You know, with the Obama administration, there was a philosophical difference. You know, they believed that Iran could become a quote-unquote responsible regional actor if you paid them off enough. We disagreed. We begged to disagree. But there was a strategic difference. Successive American administrations, Republican and Democrat, have committed themselves to preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. They never said that they would commit themselves to prevent Iran from having the ability to make a nuclear weapon. It's called threshold capacity, which is where they are right now. And we know from the Ukraine situation, where Putin, in the first week of the war, went on nuclear alert. And the minute he went on nuclear alert, the United States wasn't going to give tanks, wasn't going to give planes. Everyone's afraid the guy's going to push a button. It's enough that someone threatens. With us, the fact that Iran's on a nuclear threshold becomes a great draw on our deterrence power. Because now we think, okay, maybe we have to invade Lebanon to rid ourselves of Hezbollah, and that's a very real scenario. But we also have to take into consideration what is Iran going to do. So that's a real problem, real challenge for the state of Israel. We and the United States were incapable of preventing Iran from reaching threshold capacity. So where they are right now, they can make a bomb. It's a matter of decision. Right now, they're getting all the benefits of having a nuclear weapon without actually possessing one. But they may change their mind. Who knows? I have long been a critic of our government's policies. Again, I'm not an ambassador. I can say what the hell I want. For years, I've said that we have been playing Iran's game. And what is Iran's game? They sick their proxies after us. Hezbollah, Hamas, they shoot at us, we shoot back. They hide behind their civilian population, and we get branded war criminals. Iran gets away scot-free every time. And the United States has adopted this policy on a grand scale because Iran shoots 170 times at American bases in Iraq, Syria, and Jordan, and America does what? Bombs up, a couple of the proxies. Iran doesn't lose a hair off its head. The Houthis are blocking 20% of international commerce and firing at ships in the Straits of Mandeb. The United States bombs some Houthi things, but not taking Iran. No? I grew up in a Sicilian neighborhood. I knew if you didn't punch the biggest bully in the nose, not his friends, but the biggest bully, you couldn't survive. And believe me, Iran's going to keep on attacking. Because there's this notion somehow in Washington that in order to de-escalate, you have to de-escalate. No, in order to de-escalate, you've got to escalate. And it won't stop. Iran is responsible, and it's going to come to light soon. Iran is responsible for 98% of the horrors that have been visited on the Middle East. And it will not stop until someone takes Iran to task. Just a last point, when they killed those 3 soldiers, may their memories be blessed. I put out a little, tweet, whatever you call it these days, that said, why doesn't the United States bomb the factory in Iran that made the drones? That would have been a double blow, because it would have been a blow not just to the Iranians, it would be a blow to the Russians who were using those drones to kill Ukrainians. Did they do it? No. So I don't have very good news there. I want to end with your question. It's an excellent question. Make no mistake about it. This is I told you it's a war for national survival. It is a war for national survival. If we do not win the way we describe it, and we can't destroy the idea of Hamas, but we can eliminate Hamas as a threat to us and as a ruler over Gaza, we can do that. If we don't win in that way and get some of the hostages back, as many as humanly possible, then not only will the danger be to Israel, if we fail, if there's a ceasefire, the next country to fall will be France. The next country to fall after that will be Great Britain and Germany, because this is not a war between Israel and Hamas. It's not even a war between Israel and Gaza and the Palestinians. It is a war between Western civilization and evil. Evil. And not many people believe there's such a thing as evil in the world anymore, but it exists. They kind of think that the Holocaust was a one-off. It exists. And next, long on that line, maybe not, first in that line, is the United States of America. And it's coming. Now, there are people in Europe who understand this. They do. And the French, they can be very critical of us. The French will not allow one pro-Palestinian demonstration in Paris. The one place they're having because they know that the police will open fire on them. They have. Because they know it's their necks on the line. We are fighting this battle for every single one of the person in this room. We're fighting the battle for the people outside that don't even know it. This Sam Harris, famous atheist, wrote one of the great columns, I thought, about the war. He said, "We are all now Israelis. We just don't all know, not all of us know it yet." It was a great observation. He's absolutely right. And one of our jobs, going back to Israeli PR, is to, I make that case all the time on the news. It's not just about us and them. It's about every single person in this country, every single person in this civilization fighting evil. Evil. It's a moral war. And we're going to win it.
Before we conclude, just wait one moment, because
This wonderful man is Lou, who's our representative here for JNF.
this could not happen without JNF USA and Lou Rosenberg, so please don't leave yet. Just 2 minutes from Lou about what we can do from Ambassador Oren and getting involved with JNF USA at Sinai Temple. Just give us 2 minutes.
I could do it in 90 seconds. First of all, Rabbi Sherman, thank you so much for your partnership and our friendship. It's so much appreciated. And to the ambassador who is speaking on behalf of JNF this week throughout all of Southern California, thank you so much for everything.